As mentioned, my name is Aaron McCran. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Foundation of the South Okanagan Similkameen. We always say our full name because we do cover the entire region, the South Okanagan and the Similkameen. We've been in business since 1991. When I say business, we are a registered charity, it's operated basically as a business, but we are a registered charity. We were formed in 1991 by a volunteer board of directors, and for about 10 years it was run solely by those volunteers. At some point, right around the 10-year mark, they hired Deb O'Mara, who's the corporate salesperson for the SOEC at this point. She was the part-time executive director, paid part-time, probably worked full-time, usually how that goes, right? And then there was a transition period where Bruce Johnson, who was the chair of the school board, was the executive director for a couple of years, and he was in semi-retirement, and they asked him to work more, and he didn't want to do that. So then I had the opportunity to get the job. Any of you know Chris Hawkins? Chris Hawkins it's his fault that I'm in this position. He's a strong-minded, hard-nosed, kind of badgering type guy, and he just wouldn't let it go until I applied for the job. And I'm very grateful. Actually, probably every year I take him out for lunch just to say thanks, because it's a really amazing job. And I didn't see it at the time. I didn't get it. Community foundations were new to me. So just a little bit of a side note. When I walked into this room, because I did work at the Chamber of Commerce when it was in the old wine center, and I saw the paintings and the folding tables and the chairs, and I'm like, nothing's changed, right? It's been since 2009, I think, that I've been with the foundation, and Annette worked with me at the Chamber of Commerce as well at the time, and ran the tourism center, and it was that was a good job too. But this has been really gratifying, and there's been lots of opportunity for us. So I'm really grateful to be with the Community Foundation. Everybody know what a community foundation does?
I think I do.
Yeah. So more than 2 or 3 in a room that say yes is actually a really positive sign for us. Community foundations have a very unique role in the charitable sector. We are a registered charity. We do accept donations, but we also provide grants to other charities. That's our primary charitable purpose, is to provide grants to support other charities in the programs that they deliver. So we don't deliver services in the community. We don't provide mental health courses or counseling services or environmental stewardship. We don't do any of that stuff, but we support all of those charities that do that kind of thing. That's our role. So what happens is that people donate money to the Community Foundation, and generally speaking, that money is held in perpetuity. It goes into what's called an endowment fund. And individuals can set up their own endowment funds with its own goals and objectives, but that money, when it's in an endowment fund, is held in perpetuity, the original donation. So someone donates $100,000, we don't touch that $100,000. It stays there forever. We invest that $100,000. And the income on the investments is then granted back to the community through our annual granting process. So that's the general concept. We do much more than that now, but that's the core business of a community foundation. In the introduction, it was mentioned we have 10.4 million in assets under management. We're actually at 11.2 at this point. So I want to clarify, that's not our money. We're not sitting on $11.2 million for us to do fun things. That's money that donors have given us to steward for them to help build a better, smarter, stronger, healthier community. That's the point of having that money there. The vast majority of that money is invested long term. We do have some that's in a different format, which I'll explain in a second. But as we grow that number, what it does is it allows us to grant more to the community. That's the goal of adding to an endowment pool with a community foundation, is to be able to grant more. We grant significantly more to most of the communities in our region than the actual municipalities do themselves. Which is kind of cool, because it's the community members. It's not we being the community foundation, it's we the community granting back to the community, which is really the power of it. So in our history with endowment funds, we've granted $2.6 million to charities throughout the region. So that's obviously a significant amount. There are some community foundations in Canada that do almost 10 times that. well, one community foundation, the Vancouver Foundation, has $1 billion in assets, and they grant, actually it's about 26 and $30 million that they grant out every year. But that's Vancouver. And they also support the whole province. For our area, this is a really successful number. We're a small area. We have 83,000 people in our entire region. So this is really quite amazing that there's this level of community support. It's important to note, I think, that we're not a, oh, you can actually read that. We're not an organization that focuses on one area of need. Community foundations across Canada, there's 191 of us that are all part of this kind of like a chamber membership, Community Foundations of Canada. We all have the same philosophy. Our goal is to provide support for every area of need in a community. We share a vision that in order to have a healthy community, you actually have to support and respect every other person's area of interest. So you might be interested in animal welfare. You might not, and that's okay. You can support animal welfare and you can support environment, and that's fine. And that's what, that diversity is what creates a healthy community. So when people come to us and ask us questions about what needs to happen today, there's a difference between what's important and what is urgent for us. So there are urgent needs. There are things that need to happen now in our community from a charitable perspective, and but they're urgent. They're not necessarily more important than someone else's goal or desire for the community. And so respecting that diversity of interest and opinion is really important to us, and providing support for every area of need is really important as well. This is actually the breakdown of our granting from last year in terms of all the different areas of support that we provided. So you can see quite a lot of scholarships, really actually bursaries. We don't have technically any scholarships, they're bursary programs. About $40,000 a year in bursaries for students throughout the region. Adult students as well as high school students going on to university. Almost all to support people in like desperate financial need, trying to make life better for themselves. You can see social services as an area. It's not all that we do. It's one of many, many things. So I think it's also important to note that if we never receive another donation to our endowment pool, we'll still be granting $400,000 a year in perpetuity. So we could theoretically shutter the entire operation in terms of the staffing side of it. If we had no more operating revenue and we couldn't find any way to run the business, we could shut all that down and have a volunteer board that meets to just do granting. $400,000 a year, and that'll go on forever. We're actually required by the Trust Act, the Canadian Trust Act, to ensure that this happens forever. So there's mechanisms in place that if our organization goes away, it gets passed on to another community foundation, or in theory, in the ultimate case, a municipality is named as the one that would deal with the money, because theoretically municipalities don't go away. So in our constitution, because we have endowments, we have to go to that extent to say this will always be here. So it's pretty cool to think that $400,000 will always happen. By the way, I just want to, I should have prefaced at the start here, my goal in this presentation is to get you up to speed on what community foundations do, so that we can actually have an interactive conversation about how we can work together. When I say we, I'm talking the charitable side, the business side, how we can coordinate a little bit, plan together, work together to do something significant in our community. And I'm going to give you some examples of success stories already, and just to maybe get the juices flowing a little bit. Another type of granting that we do is what's called flow-through. This is where an organization would give us money that we would hold for them in order to give out to do something else. So an example of that is, for many years we looked after the money for the Penticton Auto Dealers Golf Tournament, which raised lots of money over the years. And all the proceeds from that golf tournament would come to the Community Foundation, and we would hold it until decisions were made about where to grant it. So once or twice a year, we would sit down with them and they would decide where they wanted the money to go. But because there was a whole bunch of dealerships involved, and no one wanted to be the one responsible for the money, they had us hold it for them. That's one example. Another more recent example would be the Summerland Refugee Organization. They were raising money, but they didn't have the time or the resources to create a charity, and therefore to have a charitable number where they can give tax receipts. But these are legitimate charitable donations that people are making. So we provided the mechanism where people donate to the Community Foundation. we hold the money for the Summerland Refugee Program, and as the money is needed, we pass it on. So that's another example. We're also doing a program right now with the Penticton and Area Cycling Association, raising money for trail enhancements, where there's just no mechanism for them to be able to receive and hold the cash, and we can manage that for them. So we do that with, many of you will have heard of 100 Men Penticton and 100 Women Penticton. That's another example of where all the money is coming into us, but it's going directly back out to the charities that those two groups select on at their quarterly meetings. So, so combining all of that in and out stuff, we're processing another $795,000 in grants through our program. So that's in total in our history, $3.4 million in grants. Obviously, that takes a bit of administration to be able to do that. You know, it's a lot of check writing, a lot of tracking, a lot of reporting mechanisms, reviewing grant applications, those kinds of things. Just a little side note, last year we had, I'll start from the beginning. When I started in 2009, we had 37 or 38 applications for funding, and we granted out $140,000. And last year, and that was from one grant cycle. Last year we had 4 grant cycles, granted just about $400,000, and we had 220 applications for funding. So it was a whole, like, everything blew up, and I just had a nervous breakdown. So we've changed our systems a little bit to make sure that there's more of our staff involved in that process, because I became a very major bottleneck, because I was the one doing all the filtering at the start of that year, and it couldn't stay that way. But anyways, that's a sign of success for our community, that there's all of these opportunities for funding. And some of that came through applications for Canada 150 projects. This is our Canada's 150th birthday, right? And we were one of the conduits for some of that Canada 150 funding. And the great thing about our participation as a conduit is that we put up, I think it was $10,000 that we put towards Canada 150, and that got matched from a federal pool of dollars. So we brought in another $10,000 for projects. We also did Neighbourhood Small Grants last year, which is another really great new program, and that brought in, we put in $5,000 for that. The City of Penticton put in $5,000, and the Vancouver Foundation put in $10,000. So we're bringing in other dollars from outside of our region as well, which is a great way of leveraging things. So the goal of all of this kind of work is, our kind of mantra is building smart and caring communities. That phrase is a national Community Foundations of Canada phrase that many foundations across the country have taken on, and every community looks at it a little bit differently. For us, Smart and Caring Communities started out with looking at providing better service to the outlying communities, because we know we do a good job in Penticton, but it was harder to reach the outlying communities. So we've taken some steps in that direction, but beyond that, the kind of more esoteric meaning of that is, and really the question is, what is a smart and caring community? Like, what does it actually mean to have a smart and caring community? And there's probably as many answers as there are people in our community, and that's really important. But generally speaking, it's about bringing the community together. That's the key. That's the way we try to look at it. So, do they need to come in here? So the question we ask ourselves all the time is, what does it take to build a smart and caring community according to the way we're imagining it? So it takes money. Of course it takes money. There's a lot of things you can't do without some dollars. Sometimes the dollars are the spark that gets things going. Sometimes they're a catalyst to bring people together. Sometimes it's the last thing that's needed to make something happen, because you've already done all the other work and you just need $5,000, right? It depends, but money is usually a part of it. It does take cooperation and collaboration with government, for sure. So, and engagement with government locally, provincially, federally. It takes charities working together to do the things that they do. One of the reasons I always go back to this, one of the reasons that we still have homelessness and we still have poverty and we still have environmental issues is that these are really hard problems to solve. They're there because we haven't figured it out yet. All over the world, we haven't figured out how to solve these things. These are almost intractable problems, right? And so we have a lot of great charities in our area that are doing amazing work to work in that area and support people that are dealing with those issues. But the problems still aren't solved. So they need support. Obviously, sometimes that's money, sometimes it's volunteering, and any number of other things. I think it also needs good corporate citizens too. Businesses are a vital part of our community. Obviously, we all need jobs. All the economic activity that keeps a community alive comes from business. So, good corporate citizens is really important. I'm going to go into that a little bit more in a bit. But ultimately, though, I think the biggest thing we need, if we sum it all up, is we need people to work together. Where am I here? We need people to work together. That's the real key. And finding ways to work together is not always easy. I'm going to tell you a little story in a bit about how challenging the process of collaboration can be, but it is really, really important. The other thing that can happen too is we are doing our best to provide tools and opportunities and leverage points for members of the community to do some of this work, because of course we can't do it all, you can't do it all. These problems are bigger than all of us, so we all need to be doing our little bit. That's the way we look at it. So what we're trying to do is provide a bunch of different tools. So quickly, I already told you about the annual granting program. We do estate planning seminars so that we can try to educate the community about that they need to plan their estate and organize their affairs, because it's amazing. I can't remember the percentage now, but it's an extremely high percentage of people don't have a will, and therefore they're basically leaving it to the government to decide what to do with their assets. Which, if you ask someone that point blank, most people don't want that, but they just never get around to doing a will. So we try to educate people about that. In that process, we really work hard to convince them that they need to give to charity in their estate planning. And it doesn't, not us necessarily. If they like our plan, then fine, but we don't talk about that in those situations. It's just give to charity, give to charity. Do something for charity. In Canada, we have, I think it's about 1.2% of our total income for our country goes to charity, which is lower than the US, much lower than the US, and really not very much in the big scheme of things, right? And especially if you take out churches and medical foundations, which account for about 55% of total giving. The rest of the whole charitable sector is dealing with like, 0.5%, right? So, so if we could just bump that just the tiniest little bit, then we're not all fighting over the crumbs. We can actually make a significant difference in the long term. So our goal in estate planning seminars is to get people to think about that just a little bit, right? I mean, people that are members of churches, they do the tithing or tithing, I can never remember how to pronounce that, but they're no richer than anybody else, right? But they're committed and they give their money every month. So that's it proves what can be done, right? I think people often I talk to people about why the U.S. has more gives more to charity than Canada. My working theory, and I have no idea if this is true or not, but my working theory is that in Canada we expect government to do these things. And in the U.S., there's less of an expectation or dependence on government to do, the social things. So they give more to charity because they don't want their government messing around with that kind of stuff. So we have a different philosophy in Canada, I think, when it comes to that. But anyways, we also provide training for charities. We do grant writing workshops to help them do a better job of finding money from other sources, and from us and maybe others as well. I mentioned 100 Women and 100 Men Who Care. Neighborhood Small Grants is a great program. I'll quickly do a pitch for that because we've actually got the application process open right now for Neighborhood Small Grants. This is an opportunity for regular citizens, not charities, to receive $500 maximum to use to do something to bring your neighbors together. So it could be a block party, it could be a cleanup campaign, it could be a tree planting, it could be a xeriscaping project, it could be like a go-kart race, kids, neighborhood Olympics, like name it. It could be anything. Yep.
I live in a townhouse complex, and a member of the townhouse complex applied for that same grant, was granted it, and purchased a barbecue that's hooked up to the gas line, and there's a community barbecue now that's used for anybody at any time. Yeah.
Super cool, right? So that's an example of just a little bit of money being the spark that brings people together, right? And one of the signs of a healthy community is connectedness between neighbors, right? And it's in smaller towns, it's usually that connectedness is usually there a bit better. But I think we assume that it's actually really strong when in most cases it's not. We don't necessarily, we might not see our neighbor for 2 weeks and not think of it, right? But maybe something's happened to that person. Maybe they've gotten divorced and we don't know anything about it. And so that's what Neighborhood Small Grants is supposed to do, is provide people with an opportunity to imagine how they could bring their neighbors together and then lead to something longer term. So anyways, the application process is open for that right now. So please think about that. It's a really cool program. It's a partnership between us, the City of Penticton, and the Vancouver Foundation. Okay, so we also do a report called Vital Signs. This is the 2015, I think. 2015 Vital Signs report. So the stats are a bit old in here. We were scheduled to do a Vital Signs report this year. We do it every other year, but the new census data is not out until the end of this year, so we're waiting for that. And we'll do Vital Signs again in 2018. The value of Vital Signs for us is in the way it's formatted. We do a community survey. We had thousands of participants last time, where we grade different issue areas. So safety gets an A- by the community in this particular case. But then in addition to that, that's the opinion, then we look at the stats, and we do the stats match the opinion. So a few years ago, for example, I think safety got a B or a B-. And the perception was we weren't a very safe community. And a lot of the comments in the survey said that as well. But the stats didn't show that. So we spent some time working with the RCMP to try to figure out how we could actually communicate to our community that we do live in a safe place and you don't have to be afraid. And what are the little things that we could do to make people feel less fearful? And that the RCMP started doing more walkabouts downtown, for example, make the police officers more visible. So, there's little things like that can come out of the Vital Signs report. It's also, if you're thinking about areas you might be interested in supporting in the community, you can grab a Vital Signs report, read through the outcomes there, and maybe it'll inspire you to do something. That's the purpose of it, is to inspire some form of action. We also have something called the Community Knowledge Center, which is an amazing resource for researching charitable opportunities in the community. If your business wants to think about supporting an area of need in our community, if you go to the Community Knowledge Center, you will see all the charities that work in that particular area. You can see, in most cases, their financial statements, their board of directors, their purpose, their mission, their vision. All of those things are laid out. There are a lot of program reports. It's a really great resource. We also have the Yes Youth Engagement Strategy, which I'll talk about in a second, and we do Random Act of Kindness Day as well, which we've done twice now. We didn't do it last year, mostly because I had 220 grant applications and I just about lost my mind. So we're hoping to do it again this year. I'm sure that we will, and it'll be the first week of November. And again, that's just all we're doing is being the trigger, right? Just to get people thinking, what can I do that's nice today, right? And all those little things make a big, big difference. And really, what they're providing is they're providing a little bit of leverage for regular citizens to do something, right? Often people they want to do something and then they get stuck because it seems so big, so complicated, so hard. If you want to find out what the best charities in the environmental area, then you can look at the Community Knowledge Center and check them all out, right? If you want to do something for your neighbors, you can do Neighborhood Small Grants. If you want to find a way to start giving back in small ways, to get involved in Random Act of Kindness Day. There's lots of different ways to make a difference, and we're hoping that all of these little tools that we provide to the community can be a leverage point to get things really rolling. 100 men and 100 women as an example of leverage. It's 4 times a year, these groups meet for 1 hour. They get together, they all throw money in the pot. They have 3 presentations from charities. Now I'm talking from the men's perspective. It's run a little bit differently, but I don't go to the women's events for obvious reasons. But anyways, there's a draw process, and they vote on the charity they're going to give the money to. And they give away $4,000. No, 100 women, the women is $5,000 an event, roughly speaking. They put $50 in a pot, and there's roughly $5,000 per event that is given away. So just as 4 hours a year is $20,000 in grants to local charities. That didn't exist a few years ago. That never happened. 100 Men is newer. There's 75, I think, members in 100 Men now. But for whatever reason, they decided they wanted to throw $100 in the pot every quarter instead of 50. So there's about $7,000, $8,000 that's given away every quarter for the 100 Men. So, I mean, between the two of them, that's a significant amount of extra charitable giving. And the charities don't have to do much. They don't have to spend 4 or 5 hours doing an application. For 100 Women, they don't even have to show up, right? They just get voted, and one of the people that nominates them talks about it. 100 Men, we ask them to come in and make a 5-minute presentation, and they might walk away with $3,000 or $4,000. So that's a leverage point, right? That's pretty awesome, and it also gets people thinking about philanthropy. It doesn't have to be hard or complicated. I want to give you a story about the Yes Project as the ultimate leverage point, to give you an example of what can happen if we work together. In 2013, the Community Foundation received a bequest from an estate from someone we didn't know. And she left us $180,000. And the direction that we were given was to do something for youth self-esteem. And that was it. It wasn't that the money had to be held in perpetuity as an endowment, and there was no details really, except something for youth self-esteem. We then talked to the United Way, who also received a bequest of the same amount of money, and we decided between the two of us to combine the dollars. So the Community Foundation then held $360,000. That money, the United Way money, was used to start the program, the Yes Project program. The Community Foundation portion of the money has been invested over this time and will be used soon. But in the time that's been invested, it's grown from $180,000 to $240,000. So that's a success in its own right. With the money from the United Way, which you still have $75,000 left, we've hired a roving support worker who works for PDCRS. It's available off hours on her cell phone, Facebook, Messenger, whatever, for any youth that want to contact her at any time. And that didn't exist in our community before Melissa was hired. We have a project coordinator who works with the youth, mentors the youth, engages them in community activism and presentations and those kind of things. And hundreds and hundreds of youth in Penticton have been involved on that side of it. We have 26 youth service providers who have all agreed to collaborate together to bring together $1.6 million in community youth services in one central youth hub. So it's the first time that these service providers have ever agreed to work collaboratively in one spot together, sharing information. So 180,000 we started with, 1.6 million commitment in terms of service delivery from the organizations.